Memory project is not history, it is the experience of history. It is the experience of people's lives. It's the bridge between contemporary and future generations to the past. One thing it has changed is the way people look at history is that they realize that it is more nuanced than they believed it to be, than your textbooks will tell you.
How often have we asked our parents or grandparents their version of an important time back in history? But telling our history through the eyes of the people who lived it has made Indian Memory Project a valuable source for future generations and is now studied in academic circles. And to think of it, Anusha Yadav started it as an experiment in 2010. The photographer, book designer, curator, and archivist was invited by the New Yorker magazine to showcase Indian Memory Project on Instagram in 2015. Anusha also curated the first ever international narrative and image-based exhibit on historical criminal investigations from the Indian subcontinent. She has been awarded the honorary mention at the Prix Ars Electronica 2013 Awards, an international award for excellence in cyber arts and online media, and the Innovator of the Year India Today Women's Summit 2014. In 2015, Anusha was listed as the top 21 photographers to follow on Instagram. She's also the founder of the Memory Company, a design firm that works on projects related to history and popular culture. Hi, I'm Mahati Rangarajan, and join me on this episode of Maharani Talks as we talk about how Indian Memory Project is continuing to shape how we experience history and how Anusha views the role of her numerous other works.
By now, I'm sure everyone knows about the Indian Memory Project.
Yeah. Not everyone.
Most, I remember when I came across it and I thought, oh my God, that was such a novel concept, and that fact that someone is doing it.
Yeah.
I thought it's a really great value addition to our history.
Yes.
Yeah. But I want to ask you, when did your fascination with history begin?
It started because of my history teacher in school. Her name was Mrs. Lakshmi Singh, and she was quite a enthusiastic teacher. So she had a reputation for that she would make your class extremely interesting. So I used to look forward to her classes as we grew up and grew into grades, because she only used to come in a certain class, right?
Right.
So when we reached it, that is when I understood why everybody thought she was the most exciting teacher, is because she would never teach from the history books. She would assume that we would learn it by rote, because that is what exams were, that you had to just remember dates and causes and consequences. And so she literally used to just pick up a thread and tell her own stories. And she was herself an avid reader. So she would just tell us where in the library, which book to read if you want to know more. But it was stories from everywhere and all kinds of alternate histories that had that were not in the textbooks. And we would write it, I remember, all of us, and it was something that fascinated. We all created a collective habit of writing bullet points of the story she would tell us in the margins of her textbook, the white space that is left around.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I remember it as something that, like, the story was always outside the frame of the text.
Okay.
And so, yeah, history was that. There is a difference between, at least in my mind, there's a difference between a collective history and a people's personal past. It's the micro and the macro, which eventually I feel that micro is like drops in the ocean, and together they come together to build this idea of experience of history.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, that's when my fascination with history began. And I think it's just great storytelling. And one of the things that have stayed in my mind is a quote I read somewhere, which was that history is gossip well told. And that is true, because that is what great storytelling is, that it keeps you smitten and your imagination is just bound to the person who's telling that story, and there's a whole movie that is being played in your head, and that I find amazing.
Yeah. It's so true for so many of us that, we often don't know what our grandparents or our great grandparents were, who our ancestors were. Did you said your history teacher piqued your interest in history. Did she ever suggest going and talking to your grandparents, finding out about, your family lineage or?
No, there was nothing of that sort. There was no connection. I think everybody drew a distinct boundary between that there was history and there was your personal history. And I was brought up at a time and in a city which is quite conservative. I was brought up in Jaipur, there was a lot of subtext about caste, which I did not grasp until much later, because it was not even spoken. It was just it's like as an understood thing. And very bizarrely, I never understood it. I just couldn't understand why people would discriminate between people. So it was just not something that was in my. If it was said to me, I would reject it outright. It was not just something I would even consider. There was nothing to get angry about. It was like this was not an idea I take to. It's not interesting enough for me to adhere to. So there was that. But in our own homes, apart from that, there was a lot of storytelling about our family. There was, because my uncle and aunts were Hindi writers and they wrote stories. So the idea of storytelling was quite big in our house, whether they were spiced up or they were exaggerated, and all family stories are exaggerated or edited or censored. One of the two things.
Yes, a little bit at least.
So it's just there. And so there was this whole romance, because my mother comes from an aristocratic family. So, the idea, and of course, eventually we realized that, but we are so broke. Where is the gold and where is the treasure? And, so it's the whole romance that we learned to live in. And there was a time when things were different and how everybody lived, and freedom struggles. And so, yeah, storytelling about our family members was a part of our lives. And photographs played a vital role in that, because they became the supporting evidence for that story, right?
Yeah.
And that included my own father, who was an amateur photographer, and then he would photograph pictures in London, and then after he passed away, we would sit and reminisce about the story. But again, it was each picture had a story. So for me, it became a non-negotiable thing that, photographs.
Yeah, and we all love to sit down and look at our personal albums from the past. Yeah.
That time there was not much TV. There was radio, and, so people did this a lot. Storytelling was very big compared to it is now. I mean, now everybody is trying to professionalize it, but it's not, doesn't work that way. In my opinion, you can't. Everybody is not a storyteller. It is something very. It's a skill that you get from your family, or you don't. It's not. And there are different kinds of storytelling, right? I mean, you don't have to be a great narrator, but you can be a great writer, or you can be a great filmmaker, or a script writer, or a radio show,
or a photographer.
Yeah. But even photographs, to tell a story, requires some experience of being able to read photographs, or some interest in reading photographs. But it's a skill. I don't think everybody who claims they have it. It's a skill that you get, or you cultivate. Yeah.
Okay. It's been 10 years since Indian Memory Project got started.
Yeah.
How has it changed in this decade?
In this decade, it's changed, that it's just become more relevant, and there are more people who are interested in it. It has changed the way in scope, and the way even I think, and it has fulfilled its agenda that I set it out to be, which was that it has to surprise me.
Does it still do?
Yeah, it does. Every story. I mean, tomorrow, if I ask you to give a story, I'll get surprised, because that is, I'm prepared, always prepared to be surprised and never to assume. That has been the basic principle of something like this, right? Is that because we assume that we know other people, we assume that we know other cultures, including a culture that my neighbor could come from, or maybe even you come from, or anybody else that we know, or their families. We don't know. We don't know the circumstances that they have gone through, what has made them into people and they are, the choices that their families have made, the troubles and the traumas they have to suffer, the beliefs that they developed over time. And so yeah, it surprises everything, and I look out for that. I look out to be surprised, and because then I can do justice to the story of sharing it with the same excitement of finding something amazing with the world, and that I feel is contagious.
And also, I think it's very important to showcase the diversity. Like you had once mentioned how pop culture has brought in a uniformity and it makes it look like everyone celebrates or does things the same way.
Yeah, but we don't.
Yeah.
And that is the fun part. And it is become more and more relevant to academics all over the world, students, people who are researching nuances. One thing it has changed is the way people look at history, is that they realize that it is more nuanced than they believed it to be, than your textbooks will tell you. This is good, this is bad. No, there's a whole grayscale of, and to give dimension to people, right? To look at people in the current sphere of our lives, contemporary, the ones who are alive, and the ones who were, that there are multiple dimensions to a person, and they are not just good or bad, and they do things because of circumstances or because of pressures and because of themselves. So there's a whole trinity of reasons why people do things, and the choices they make, and the cultures that they evoke within their family and in a broader area of society.
Right.
So yeah, but mainly it's not changed, but it's also changed at the same time. The more people like it, the more even I'm encouraged to keep at it, right? So it's because I like it, the reward is the dopamine hit is people liking something or talking about it, or it evokes a conversation, and it has, yeah. So I would say that it helps people see that history is, or the past is, far more nuanced than they can imagine and more diverse. It's crazy. It's a crazy country or subcontinent. We've not even touched the tip of the iceberg on how crazy it is.
Yeah, that's true. When did you realize how big it had become? How far along the journey did it hit you?
When I saw that on academia.edu there were 13,000 articles written on it.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's when I realized that. Yeah, or referred to it, or talked about it, or critiqued it, or whatever. But yeah, 13,000. That's when I knew.
Which year was this in?
2 years ago.
Okay.
That's the only way I can come up with a number too. But it's been, and also because people started, I could tell by visits, I could tell by clicks, but there are already so many scattered, right? I can't keep track of 24 hours of how many people have visited a site are going live, but I can do an afterthought. So yeah, I'll say, okay, fine, there were 13,000 visits, 10,000 visits this month or this week. Which story? But everybody's not every story. So as a collective idea, that is when I knew that the project was far more relevant than I had thought it to be. Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel has your life changed ever since you started the project?
It made me more interesting.
But come on, you were a photographer, book designer, curator. I'm sure you were always interested.
Yeah, this adds a layer. it made me more interesting to me. The thing is, we underestimate the kind of appraisal that we give ourselves as well. And I don't shy away from it. I appraise myself a lot. Uh, there's not about, oh, I praise myself. It's an appraisal. They're two different things. It's basically, I've learned a lot. It has made me more patient. It has made me more aware to take a step back and say, when somebody does something, what is the reason? It's made me more interested in human behavior. It's made me more interested in being able to connect dots. It's made me being able to embrace the zeitgeist and be able to see what might happen in the future and how my dots might connect because of what I understand of the past. And it has educated me mainly. I mean, I had so many notions of things that it just totally smashed them down, that you become more and more aware of how different the world is and how everybody, whether they are, and I said this, no, how small, how big they are, they have made a difference in this world. And it's more, I'm very interested in, in the end, I have an intern right now who is as I asked him once, I said, what is your most favorite series? And he said, my favorite series is Sherlock Holmes. And to which I said that this is what you are and this is what I am. We are detectives of history. And it's like, and which is why what Sherlock Holmes did essentially, even as a fictional character, was connect random dots.
Yeah.
And come to a conclusion. And I find that fascinating, is that, that we are chasing, investigating, fact-checking, letting some narratives be, understanding and trying to understand the world more better. And that is what Memory Project did for me. Again, it made me understand the world a whole lot better than I did earlier. And it made me better at interviewing people. It made me interested in, see, the thing is, there are lots of things that come together for me to become good at what this is. And and every day is a practice. I don't do it every day, but every time I sit on it, it's like doing yoga. You just become better at it every time. Yeah. Or you realize where you've gone wrong and you go back and fix it. Is that photography played a role in terms of it harnessed my sense of body language. That is what photography did for me, because I photograph people a lot.
Right.
And because of having an understanding of that, I became a better interviewer, because I could read between the lines of people, what they were trying to say, what they are trying to, voice, what they are trying to elaborate, say with body or with voice that they couldn't say in words. And so it's like harnessing a skill and you sharpen it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are many, many things that I'm sure I can't even articulate that it has done for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You must have come across by now thousands of stories. But in your opinion, as a woman, which era do you think was the most interesting?
I'm very interested in glamour. So
okay.
There is this because my mother comes from an aristocratic family, and there's this whole romance of beauty and glamour and the thing is all of it, because photography per se interests me. So before being a woman, it is the photographer's eye that far more excites me. But yeah, I mean, if I were to say, that I find it very exciting, and mainly because they also have aesthetically better looking photographs, and it's a whole different dynamic at play, which is also that there's a whole paradox of thought going on at exactly the same time. This was a great looking picture, but it's also because they could afford it.
Yeah.
They could afford to hire a photographer. They could afford to buy this print in this size and this other size where people did not have photography. But mainly, glamour is one. But what excites me most is stories about women who have done things that who have developed confidence that it took me a while to come into. That is what excites me as well. And number one, I don't care what they did, but just the confidence to do it. And I am very nuanced about morals. I mean, I don't care what people did as long as they didn't harm anybody.
Yeah.
It's not something that concerns me.
Live and let live.
I'm not hurt or stuck. I don't care. Yeah. So I just find that fascinating, that whatever they did, and they did to the best of their knowledge, they did, because it was a matter of survival. It was a matter of taking a risk, fully knowing that the patriarchy of society can come back and stab them in their backs or in from the front. But I find that extremely fascinating. And it gives me courage, even till today. Because something I read about somebody did in 17th century, I'm still inspired. I feel, okay, if they could do it, I can do it.
That's true, yeah. Another interesting anecdote of yours that you mentioned that I found was when you said during partition, the schools and colleges were shut.
Yeah.
And there's such a little bit parallel to it now, considering with the pandemic, everything is shut. But yet none of us knew that during partition, that too for 2 years, you had mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something that I spoke about recently, saying that it's an interesting thing that everything is being documented right now. At that time, it wasn't documented. Nobody wrote about it also because education wasn't at forefront. Nobody cared about, I mean, not nobody, but the general masses didn't care about it. Education was an elite's right until it started becoming encoded into the system that education is good.
Right.
So yeah, but now everything is documented. So 100 years from now, people will know that during this time, because the thing is that if this happens again, everybody needs this documentation in whatever form it is, whether it's on social media, to know how people coped with it and how to make it better. Because that is what history will teach you, is how to make it better. That is what it's like, practicing life, right? This is the next time it happens, we will be better at it, at handling it or taking. So which we didn't have earlier. So nothing was documented. So people say it in passing because this is something I've noticed, is that everybody who is alive right now, interestingly, feels that a 5-year-old child would know what partition meant. We assume it.
Yeah.
Versus actually saying that, and it's just something that, because we don't, in a living room, if there's a grandparent sitting with a young child and they talk about partition, and the child doesn't say anything or is not paying attention, they assume that they would just know. They don't know. You have to tell people. So the generations, it's a very interesting thing. Collectively, we take a lot of information for granted until you start breaking it down into generations. That how would you know what like, for example, I don't know, how old are you? Just out of curiosity.
I'm 37.
Yeah. So you would not know what our experience of a black and white TV was like.
I wouldn't, yeah.
Right. But in a collective get together in a living room, somebody mentions a black and white TV, they would assume you know what you're talking about, mainly because you are in that room. So there's a lot of stuff that, and it's an afterthought. He said, oh, of course you're 27. Oh, you wouldn't know. How would you know? Like, I had to ask you how you. So it's
I'm 37.
But it's just that, 37. But it's just the idea of not being able to sometimes realize that there is intersectionality of age groups and generations that are different, that people assume that you take for granted. So when that person mentioned it in passing, they assumed I knew what they were talking about. It was only when I caught on to it and I said, no, hold on, go back. Why were colleges and schools closed for 2 years? And they say, well, don't you know that partition time they were closed? And that's something that, again, and also things that there was no documentation, number one. Number two, education was not a big deal. for a lot of people. I mean, it was okay if you didn't get educated as long as you knew how to calculate, do some math, basic math, and send a basic telegram. Other than that, there was no real requirement, right? So,
right. Okay. Your work as a photographer, in particular, you've done a series called Transfixed.
yeah.
I want to know what made you do that. Why did you undertake it? Especially, I thought it was relevant to ask, considering it's a Pride Month now.
I wanted to take it on, one, because I really wanted to do something in portraiture that was more something that the creation of it I could control, rather than finding something. I wanted to make something, and there is a difference between finding photographs and making photographs. And I like to do both, and something that you start from an imaginary idea rather than let me go and document something that already exists. And I have a lot of friends who are in the queer group, and I would often take advice from them. Like I told you, I'm interested in glamour. I enjoy makeup. I enjoy the whole thing. So it was just getting tips from them, their knowledge, their struggles, and then I wanted to, and I also confess that I just saw it in my head. I just saw the image in my head, and which is usually the case with most of the work I do, is that I see things in my head and they make sense. And then I just have to manifest that idea into some kind of form. And then I decided to do it formally rather than, so I made one, then I made two, and then the third one, I was like, okay, yeah, this is what and I wanted people to, I talk about this to myself as to what is my purpose in life, or basically what makes, not even purpose, what will make me useful to this world, mainly, is that I like to be useful. And we all have to harness our skills to be useful, whatever that is, whether you are an entertainer, you are a storyteller, you are whatever. And I decided that my purpose or my use in life is that I best serve when I can be a good bridge, that I would want to connect to not disconnected points. And I think Memory Project did that for me. That is one thing I realized, that is when I also realized that I was playing the role of a bridge. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I felt that I was being of use to some people. And I did the same thing with photography, and I realized that I was doing the same thing, that I wanted that whatever I document or create is serving the purpose of a bridge where you are trying to connect two different ideas to each other, so that there can be greater understanding between the two. And that's what I wanted to do with Transfixed as well, that I felt that there was an opportunity for me to tell us to a portrait series that could connect the bridge between people who are different than what society says is normal. And I say society says it's normal because there is nothing called normal.
Right.
Everybody is different. There is it's a collectively agreed upon idea, the idea of normal. And and that there was nothing to fear, that this was something to be celebrated. This is something to be enjoyed. This is something that is that amazing perspective, a very different perspective. I think it's something to be, I was excited by it all the time, so how could you not be excited by it?
Was it hard to convince them to do it?
Not at all. Not at all. They were, in fact, most excited because, this is how they like the idea of I mean, whoever was willing to come, and they love the idea of seeing themselves formally They love the idea of being celebrated. They love the idea of me enjoying them exactly how they want. It's like, it's not very different from how we enjoy friends. I mean, I know a certain friend will come to you invite a certain friend to a party and you're so excited about it because they know they have a great sense of humor. They're going to just liven up the party. There's just going to be so much excitement, and there's intelligence, and there's humor, and there's banter, and there's joy, right? And
yeah,
why? And I think they know that they have so much joy to offer, but there's a lot of darkness because it's mainly because of people not accepting them for who they are. And I find that foolish. I mean, it's a lost opportunity if you don't embrace that joy, in my opinion.
yeah. But in a society that largely sees gender as binary, did how was it received?
Yeah, they liked it. They liked it. There are people I met who had no idea that this was something to be celebrated. There were people who thought this was something that they thought was odd, but then it helped them change. And again, this is what the role of playing the bridge is, that it's a meeting point of two different ideas. So the work becomes the meeting point of two different. So my gaze uh, and my other acquaintances who are not afraid is the wrong word, but wary of gender that is not
Yeah,
specifically binary, to think that, oh, maybe there's something to it. Maybe we can open up our mind, even if it's for like a tiny bit. Maybe we can look at things from my ways. And so but it was well received, yes.
okay.
Not internationally, but only mostly nationally, because I felt it was a more national idea. Internationally, it's a different way of looking at things, and there's a far more I feel that their idea of
Acceptance.
not acceptance is there internationally, but it's also a very
Yeah,
the
that's what I mean.
cultural acceptance is not welcome as much. They're not that interested in seeing things that are very Indian, unless it's extremely exotic, like a tiger or rural porn or exotic porn that of India that people are used to seeing. They don't take to India that can be more contemporary and exciting very easily. So, but that's just a collect. It's not something. It's again not something to be criticized as much as observed and know where to position the project. But it didn't matter also, because it was, as long as it was making some difference or some giving a new form of thought for India, that was enough, right? Because this is the problem. This is where the problem is. I mean, we should be dealing with our own problems rather than wondering how should I solve America's or Europe's problems. So
Yeah, yeah. And I also liked Impersonations, your self-portrait series.
yeah, that was, again, I'm telling you, my grandmother's. It came from that exotic romance of. It started there. Yeah, it started there, and then I just got into it because it was, again, imagination, right? It's telling yourself a story and trying to see if I can imagine what that life was like, or what it was like. Yeah, that's it. It was just an exploration of that, and
Yeah.
identities and how they must have felt or spoken, and it's like acting. It's like being in a role.
And to realize that they actually led interesting lives.
Yeah, they did, or so I would like to believe. But the further you go, the more interesting history gets anyway. So which is why the oldest picture would be most interesting. But yeah, it is. It was an exciting. It was a very exciting investigation for me. That to be able to see yourself in different roles and with ideas I didn't have the courage to embrace, or would wonder how somebody even dealt with problems like that. I mean, it's an interesting space, even if it's for just a little bit of time.
Okay. Your other project, Letters of Love,
Yeah.
is that still ongoing?
It's still ongoing. It's a tough one because people are not very forthcoming with love letters, and
it's more personal, I guess.
it's more personal. It's also legally a little troublesome because when you publish letters, you need the permission of both the sender and the receiver.
True.
And if either of them are alive, then the estate has to sign off, or there should be reasonable cause for not receiving uh, uh, any objection to publish something. And so therefore you have to even legally show that that reasonable effort was made to find out or investigate. But yeah, but it's an ongoing project. Eventually it may come through, it may not, it may become an archive, it may not, but it's something that is a very fascinating place for me to explore. I enjoy the idea. See, again, it's the more private things are, the more interested I am in digging further. So I'm a bit of a voyeur that way. I want to know everybody's business, and it's not because I can go and spread rumors about you, but it's very selfish. It's something that I want to know, that what can I learn from it.
Okay. My last question to you, for both concerning both the Indian Memory Project and yourself.
Yeah.
What is a role you think IMP will play in the future?
It's the bridge between contemporary and future generations to the past. It's a meeting point. And it offers sense of nuances. That history is far more gray, far more complicated. Memory Project is not history, it is the experience of history. It is the experience of people's lives. And,
Right.
there is a difference between the two. And
do you think somewhere it'll help at least set a better framework for the curriculum in schools or in colleges?
It does. It's already there. I mean, it is being taught in schools. The idea of exploring your own past. Also, it gives you your own neighborhood a context, your own friends a context. To understand that everybody comes with a background. They just appear like, poof, by magic, and that there is multiple dimensions to people. And one thing I know for sure is that whatever we are, everything forms by the time we turn 20. Every set of belief, every set of ideas is all set then. And everything else is just layering on top. Unless something drastic happens. But 90% of you is formed by the time you turn 20. Your belief systems and all.
Right.
So it's something to understand that there is a background at play in everybody's lives. And there is a background, the subconscious patterns that are being formed because of where you were brought up, who brought you up, and how did they do and what did they do. And if there are mistakes, you can, and it's not as if everything that is being taught is being absorbed as agreed upon, right? It's just something that we fight with internally. We don't agree with it or agree with it. And that is something that will form the person that you become eventually. Yeah. Somewhere.
What about you? What are the projects you're working on at the moment?
I'm currently working on trying to see if I can make right now it's a crazy time. So it's like it's become really slow. But I'm currently working on getting a few more stories. Currently, every 4 days I go and I work for 1 hour on a photo idea that I've been trying to do for 1 year or longer, 2 years, I think.
Oh.
And then I'm doing a couple of client projects right now who are right now not extremely active because of the COVID situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going on. And then I'm working on trying to see if I can make in a memory project magazine that I can release twice a year, like a biannual.
Okay.
To see, but just for joy.
How about a book?
Eventually, Yeah, eventually, but not right now. I think not right now. I like baby steps towards things. Uh, and I'm very risk averse in some ways. And
Enjoy the process.
I enjoy the process. I'm extremely risk averse in many things, but it's also a paradox because I'm extremely risk prone in many areas of my life. So,
okay.
But this, I like to see this. Everything is an experiment for me. Memory project was an experiment. It was not like, oh, this is it. This is how we're going to do it. It was like just to see if it can be done. And I like projects that are more experimental in ideas than just I have the solution. I don't. I've done a lot of things that were purely experiments and did not work.
Okay.
So it's best to do something.
Yeah. Try it out and see how it goes.
What one life, yeah. You're not going to get this. I'm not going to get the same brain.
I know.
The same situation, circumstances, events ever again in my
Yeah, attitude in life.
Yeah, attitude. Yeah. Might as well just have fun with it. Nobody cares actually. In the end, everybody's thinking of themselves.
That's true. Thank you so much, Anusha. It was a blast talking to you.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. You can find out more about Indian Memory Project at indianmemoryproject.com and reach Anusha at anushayadav.com. Take care.